He was already late when the building caught fire. The smoke came first, thick and sharp, pushing people into the street with their coats half on and their phones still in their hands. He could have kept walking. His son was waiting at school. His interview suit was folded in the back seat. Everything about that morning depended on staying on schedule. But someone was still inside. He didn't think about being a single father, or about the job he needed more than he admitted. He stepped back through the door, because the sound coming from inside didn't leave room for choice. It was a woman's voice, breaking, uneven, close to giving out. Hours later, clean and dry, he sat in a conference room answering questions about leadership and responsibility. Then the door opened, and the woman from the fire walked in, alive, steady, and now holding the power to decide his future. If you're drawn to slow, grounded stories like this, stay with it. He woke before the alarm because he usually did. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that came from habit, not peace. The ceiling fan turned without sound. He lay still for a moment, counting what needed to happen before 8. Lunch. Drop-off. Traffic. The interview. He sat up and reached for his phone. No new messages. No missed calls. That was good. It meant nothing had already gone wrong. In the kitchen, he moved carefully, opening cabinets without letting them shut too hard. He poured cereal into a bowl and slid it across the table. His son came in rubbing one eye, hair bent in the wrong direction. He wore the same sweatshirt he tried to wear every morning. "Blue shirt today," the man said. The boy frowned but didn't argue. He went back down the hall. The man watched the clock while the kettle heated. He didn't rush, but he didn't pause either. Everything had a place in the order. If he stayed inside it, the day usually held. He packed the lunch without thinking much about it. Sandwich cut straight, not diagonal. Apple washed and dried. A note folded small, nothing clever, just his name written once. He slid the lunch into the bag and set it by the door. The suit hung on the back of the chair. He had brushed it the night before. He touched the sleeve now, checking for lint that wasn't there. He wouldn't wear it until later. He didn't want the smell of the car on it. He didn't want wrinkles. He didn't want anything he couldn't control. At the school, the line of cars crawled forward. He waited his turn. Window cracked. Other parents waved or leaned across seats to hug children longer than necessary. He nodded to one woman he recognized. She nodded back. No one asked questions. When his son opened the door, the man handed him the lunch bag. "Big day," the boy said. The man paused. "Yeah." "For you," the boy added. The man smiled. "Just enough. I'll pick you up on time." The boy shut the door and ran toward the gate without looking back. The man stayed parked until he disappeared inside. Then he pulled away, already calculating how long he had. The drive downtown was slower than he liked. A delivery truck blocked one lane. Someone honked behind him. He didn't respond. He kept his eyes forward. The building came into view, taller than the others on the street, glass catching the early light. He parked 2 blocks away. The closer spaces cost more, and he learned to walk when he could. He took the suit from the back seat, folded over his arm, and locked the car. The street smelled like coffee and exhaust. People passed him without looking. Halfway down the block, his phone vibrated. A reminder for the interview time. He slowed, checked the screen, then put it back in his pocket. He still had room. Not much, but enough. The building entrance was crowded. Someone laughed too loudly near the door. Another man straightened his jacket, eyes fixed on his reflection. The man waited, then stepped aside to let a woman with a stroller pass. That was when he noticed the smell. It wasn't strong yet, just a sharp edge in the air that didn't belong. He stopped walking. The people around him kept moving. Someone held the door open from inside. He looked up at the building, then down the street. For a second, he considered checking the time again. He didn't. He stood there, suit folded over his arm, feeling the first thin thread of something pulling the day away from him. The fire alarm began to sound. The alarm sent people spilling out of the building in uneven waves. Some moved quickly. Others stood near the entrance, confused, phones already raised. He stepped back toward the curb and waited, suit still folded over his arm. The sound cut through him, sharp and mechanical, but he didn't panic. Panic wasted time. A man in a security jacket shouted something he couldn't hear. Someone else laughed, nervous and high. The smell grew thicker, less abstract. Smoke slid out through the open doors, low and gray, like it was testing the air before committing. He checked his phone then. 8:32. He should have been inside by now, signing in, steadying his breathing. Instead, he stood in the street with everyone else, watching order thin. He moved away from the entrance and leaned against a parking meter. He didn't want the suit near the smoke. He draped it over his forearm and rolled the sleeve of his shirt up once. His hands were already slightly dirty from the curb. He rubbed them together, then stopped. It didn't help. A woman next to him asked if he knew what was happening. He shook his head. She nodded, like that was the answer she expected. She walked away, dialing someone. He tried to think through alternatives. If the building cleared quickly, maybe the interview would be delayed. If not, he could call. He didn't like calling. He preferred showing up. Showing up had always mattered more than explanations. The minutes passed without shape. No one from the building addressed the crowd. Fire trucks hadn't arrived yet. The alarm kept sounding indifferent to time. He looked down the block, then back at the entrance. The doors were still open. Smoke pushed out in slow breaths. People kept coming through, some coughing, some annoyed. One man argued with security, gesturing toward the lobby. He lost and stepped back. The man adjusted his grip on the suit. He felt exposed, standing there, like he was between roles. Not a candidate, not a bystander, just someone waiting. His phone buzzed again. A text from the school. Early dismissal scheduled for next week. He read it, flagged it, put the phone away. The normal world kept sending him small requests. He answered them because that's what kept things from collapsing. A woman exited the building quickly, heels in one hand, eyes red. She didn't stop. Behind her, another man came out carrying a plant from an office lobby. Dirt spilled onto the sidewalk. No one picked it up. That was when he heard the sound. It didn't carry far. It wasn't loud, just a broken call from somewhere past the doors, uneven and close to disappearing. Most people didn't react. They were already turning away, already deciding they were done. He straightened. The sound came again, thinner this time. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't asking for help in a way that demanded attention. It was the sound of someone trying not to panic and failing. He took a step forward, then stopped. He looked at the building number above the door, as if it might change. He looked at his watch. 8:36. He thought of his son's backpack on the hook by the door at home. Thought of the interview room he hadn't seen yet. Thought of how carefully he'd stacked the morning so nothing would fall. Another step. The suit slipped slightly on his arm. He caught it and folded it tighter, then looked around for somewhere to put it. There was a low concrete wall near the entrance. He laid the suit there, away from the door, smoothed it once, and left it. Inside, the air was warmer. The light dimmed after a few steps. The alarm sounded different now, closer, pressing against his chest. He covered his mouth with his sleeve and moved forward, keeping one hand on the wall. "Hello?" he called. Not loud. The answer came from deeper inside, strained and hoarse. A woman's voice. He couldn't see her yet. The hallway bent left, then disappeared. He walked faster, careful not to run. Running meant falling. Falling meant wasting time. The floor was clear, but the smoke thickened with every step. "I'm here," he said, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to. "Just keep talking." The voice answered again, closer now. He turned the corner and saw her sitting on the floor near a stairwell door, one shoe missing, hair pulled loose from its clip. Her face was streaked with soot. She was breathing too fast. He crouched in front of her, close enough to be seen. "Can you stand?" he asked. She shook her head once, then nodded, then shook it again. Her hand trembled when she reached for the wall. He took her arm. She was lighter than he expected, but unsteady. When she tried to stand, her knee buckled. She made a sound he didn't want to hear again. "It's okay," he said. "We're going out." He pulled her arm over his shoulder and lifted carefully. The heat pressed in from somewhere above them. The alarm didn't stop. He focused on the doorway behind him, the thin strip of lighter air. They moved together, slow and uneven. She coughed against his shoulder. He adjusted his grip and kept going, step by step, not letting himself think about anything past the next one. By the time they reached the doors, his eyes burned and his chest felt tight. The outside air hit them both hard. She stumbled forward and dropped to her knees on the sidewalk. Someone shouted. Hands appeared, pulling her away from him. He stepped back, dizzy, and leaned against the wall. The world narrowed, then widened again. He searched for the concrete wall where he'd left his suit. It was still there. The first fire truck arrived, siren cutting through the alarm. He picked up the suit and held it against his chest, now streaked with ash. His hands shook. He waited for them to stop. They didn't. A firefighter approached him, helmet already marked with soot. He asked a few questions the man answered without detail. Yes, someone was inside. Yes, he helped her out. No, he didn't know where the fire started. The firefighter nodded and moved on. There was no pause for praise. There didn't need to be. The woman he'd pulled out was sitting on the curb now, wrapped in a jacket that wasn't hers. Paramedics hovered nearby. She was talking, hands moving as she spoke. He didn't stay to listen. He turned away, checking his watch again. 8:47. He walked a short distance down the block and sat on the edge of a planter. His breathing slowed. The shaking in his hands eased enough for him to fold the suit more carefully. One sleeve was darkened near the cuff. He rubbed at it with his thumb. The stain stayed. He considered going home. That was the cleanest option. Call the school, explained. Reschedule the interview if he could. But the thought settled poorly. He hadn't come this far to step away now. He stood, brushed ash from his shirt, and started back toward the building. The lobby was open again by the time he reached the doors. The alarm had stopped. A thin smell lingered, but it no longer drove people back. Security waved a small group inside, one at a time. The man joined them. Inside, the space felt altered, even though nothing looked broken. Chairs were out of place. A potted plant lay on its side, soil scattered. Someone had tried to sweep it into a pile and given up. The air was heavy, like it hadn't decided what it was yet. He asked where interviews were being held. A woman at the desk glanced at his shirt, then pointed down the hall. Her expression didn't change. In the restroom, he washed his hands and face. The water ran gray at first, then clear. He studied himself in the mirror. His eyes were red. A faint line of soot marked his collar. He loosened his tie, then retied it. He put on the suit jacket, despite the smell. It fit the same as it had an hour earlier. Outside the conference room, two other candidates waited. One was scrolling through his phone. The other stared at the floor. No one spoke. When the door opened, the assistant called names. His was last. Inside, the table was long and bare. 3 people sat on one side, folders open. They looked up as he entered. He shook hands, careful with his grip. He sat when invited. The questions were familiar. Background, experience, how he handled pressure. He answered evenly, choosing words that didn't draw attention to themselves. He spoke about responsibility as something shared, about staying calm, about doing what needed to be done even when it wasn't convenient. No one interrupted him. No one nodded. They wrote things down. Halfway through, one of them asked how he dealt with unexpected problems. The man paused. He felt the heat in his chest again, the sound of the alarm still echoing somewhere behind his ribs. I focus on what's in front of me, he said. Then I deal with what comes after. The room stayed quiet. Someone closed a folder. When the interview ended, they thanked him and said they'd be in touch. The words were practiced, weightless. He stood, shook hands again, and left. Outside, the street had returned to itself. The fire trucks were gone. People moved past the building without looking up. He stood for a moment on the sidewalk, unsure what to do with his hands. Then his phone buzzed, a missed call from an unknown number. A voicemail notification followed. He didn't listen to it right away. He walked to his car instead, each step steady. At the school pickup later, his son ran toward him as usual. He knelt to meet him. The boy stopped short, eyes narrowing. "You smell weird," the boy said. The man smiled. "Long day." They walked to the car together. As they buckled in, the boy looked at him again. "Did you help someone?" he asked. The man paused, key in hand. He looked at his son, then started the engine. "Yeah," he said. The boy nodded once, satisfied. He turned to look out the window. That night, after his son fell asleep, the man sat at the kitchen table and listened to the voicemail. The woman's voice was steady now. She thanked him. She said she worked in the building. She said she hoped he was okay. She left her name. He didn't call back. He set the phone down and turned off the light. Sleep came late and left early. He woke before the alarm again, this time because his shoulder hurt when he rolled onto it. He sat up slowly and waited for the sharpness to fade. It didn't completely. He accepted that and stood. The morning repeated itself, but not cleanly. He burned the toast. He forgot the note in the lunch bag and only realized when they were already in the car. His son didn't notice. The man noticed everything. At work that day, temporary, hourly, a place that knew him only as someone reliable. He moved slower than usual. His supervisor asked if he was sick. He said no. That was the end of it. The voicemail sat on his phone all morning. He didn't delete it. He didn't replay it either. He carried it with him, the way he carried the ache in his shoulder, present but unspoken. Just after lunch, another call came. The same number. This time, he answered. She didn't say his name at first. She asked if it was him, then corrected herself, then apologized for calling again. He told her it was fine. He listened while she spoke, her sentences careful, measured, like she was trying not to take up too much space. She said she'd been released from the hospital. Smoke inhalation. No serious injuries. She said she wanted to thank him in person, but understood if he didn't want that. She paused, waiting for him to decide. He looked at the clock on the wall. He thought about his son's pickup time. He thought about the interview room, empty now, already belonging to someone else. "I can meet for a few minutes," he said. They chose a cafe near the building. Neutral ground. When he arrived, she was already there, sitting straight, both hands wrapped around the mug she hadn't touched. She stood when she saw him, then stopped herself halfway. "Thank you," she said. The words landed plainly, without force. He nodded and sat across from her. Up close, she looked different. Cleaner. Composed. The soot and panic were gone. She wore a blazer and had her hair tied back. If he hadn't known, he wouldn't have recognized her. They didn't talk long. She asked about his shoulder. He shrugged. He asked if she was sleeping okay. She said, not really. That was enough. When they stood to leave, she hesitated. "I don't know how to repay you," she said. He shook his head. "You don't." She studied him for a moment, then nodded, like she understood something new. 2 days later, the email arrived. A polite rejection. They thanked him for his time and said they'd chosen someone whose experience more closely matched their needs. He read it once and closed it. That evening, he picked his son up later than usual. Traffic stalled near the bridge. When they got home, the boy sat at the table while the man made dinner. He dropped a pan lid louder than he meant to. The boy looked up. "Are you mad?" the boy asked. "No," the man said, too quickly. He tried again. "Just tired." They ate quietly. Afterward, the boy helped with the dishes without being asked. When they finished, he stood at the sink longer than necessary, hands in the water. "You didn't go to the new job," the boy said. The man dried his hands. "No." "Why?" He considered explaining. He didn't. It didn't work out. The boy nodded. He accepted answers the way he accepted weather. Then he said, "You still did the right thing." The man froze. The boy wasn't looking at him. He was lining up his shoes by the door, focused on getting them straight. "I saw it on the news," the boy added. "They showed the fire." The man turned off the light in the kitchen and stood there in the dark, letting the quiet settle. The next morning, his phone rang again. Same number? He answered. She didn't waste time this time. She told him she'd been on the interview panel. She told him she hadn't known it was him until he walked into the room. She told him she hadn't said anything because it wasn't her decision alone. I thought you should know, she said. He thanked her. When the call ended, he sat at the table for a long time, hands folded, listening to the house breathe. The days that followed did not announce themselves as different. They arrived the way days usually did, with light through the window and the sound of the radiator clicking on and off. He got up. He made breakfast. He walked his son to school. The routine still worked, but it required more effort, like a door that no longer closed on its own. At work, he was given fewer hours the following week. No explanation. Just a revised schedule taped to the wall. He stood in front of it longer than necessary, reading the names and times as if they might rearrange themselves. When his supervisor walked past, she didn't meet his eyes. He folded the paper and put it in his pocket. At home, the suit stayed on the back of the chair. He hadn't taken it to the cleaners. He hadn't decided whether to. The faint smell of smoke clung to it, not strong enough to fill the room, just enough to be noticed when he passed by. Sometimes he stopped and pressed the sleeve between his fingers, testing whether the stain had softened. It hadn't. The woman from the fire didn't call again. He didn't expect her to. Whatever space had existed between them closed without noise. He understood that. Gratitude had a shelf life. So did proximity. His shoulder improved slowly. Some mornings it felt almost normal. Other mornings it caught when he reached too far. He adjusted without complaint, lifting grocery bags differently, sleeping on his back. He didn't take painkillers. He wanted to feel where the limits were. At school pickup, his son talked more than usual. About a substitute teacher. About a kid who cried during math. He listened and responded when needed. When they reached the car, the boy stopped and pointed across the street. That's the building, he said. The man followed his gaze. The building looked unchanged. Clean windows, people coming and going. No sign of the morning it had burned. Yeah, the man said. Is the lady okay? The boy asked. She's fine. The boy considered that. Good. They drove home in silence. At a stoplight, the man checked his mirrors, then adjusted the rear view slightly. His reflection looked tired. Not defeated, just worn at the edges. Later that week, a letter arrived addressed to him by name. No logo on the envelope. Inside was a short note from the company. It thanked him again for his time and mentioned the incident at the building. It said they appreciated his integrity. It did not offer anything else. He placed the letter on the table and left it there. That night, he made dinner with more care than usual. He cut vegetables evenly. He wiped the counter twice. His son watched him. You're being quiet, the boy said. I know. Are you thinking? The man nodded. About the fire. He paused. About everything. The boy slid his plate closer and ate another bite. Thinking doesn't fix stuff, he said. The man looked at him. What does? The boy shrugged. Doing things. The next morning, the man woke earlier than usual. He got dressed and put on the suit. He didn't bother brushing it again. He left before his son woke and walked to the building downtown. The lobby was busy. He stood near the desk and waited until someone asked if he needed help. He said he was there to drop off paperwork. It wasn't a lie. He handed over a copy of his resume, folded once, clean. I interviewed last week, he said. I wanted to make sure this was on file. The woman at the desk took it without comment. She thanked him and placed it in a tray. He didn't ask where it would go. As he turned to leave, he saw the woman from the cafe across the lobby. She was walking with two other people, talking quietly. She saw him at the same moment. They stopped. She excused herself and crossed the room. They stood a few feet apart, not close enough to lower their voices. I didn't know you were coming, she said. I wasn't sure either, he replied. She looked at the suit, then at his face. I'm sorry about the decision. He nodded. I know. They stood there, the space between them filled with things neither of them would say. Finally, she spoke again. There may be another opening, she said. Not the same role. He waited. It's less stable, she added. And it pays less. He thought of the schedule on the wall, the folded paper in his pocket, the way his son lined up his shoes. Okay, he said. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. I'll call you. When he left the building, the air felt lighter than it had in days. Not because anything was fixed, because something had moved. That evening, his son noticed the suit was gone from the chair. Where is it? He asked. The man hung his jacket by the door. I took it out. The boy smiled, small and sure. Good. The man turned off the light and stood there for a second longer than necessary, letting the quiet hold. The call came 3 days later, just after noon. He was on his break, sitting in his car with the window cracked, eating a sandwich he'd made that morning. He recognized the number before it finished ringing. She spoke plainly. The role was part-time to start, contract-based. Fewer guarantees. It wasn't leadership. It wasn't a step up. It was work that needed doing, and they needed someone who would do it without supervision. He asked when they'd want him to start. There was a pause on the line, brief but noticeable. As soon as possible, she said. He said yes before she finished the sentence. After the call ended, he stayed in the car, hands on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield at nothing in particular. He felt no surge of relief, no sense of victory, just a quiet awareness that something had shifted and would not shift back. That evening he told his son while they washed dishes. He explained the hours first, then the pay. He didn't dress it up. He didn't apologize. So you'll still pick me up? The boy asked. Yes. And you'll still make breakfast? Yes. The boy nodded, satisfied. He rinsed a plate and handed it over. Then it's fine. The first day on the job, the man arrived early. Not because he was eager, but because he didn't want to arrive late. The office they placed him in was smaller, tucked away from the main floor. No windows. A desk that had been used by someone else and cleaned without care. He worked quietly. He learned the systems. He took notes. No one checked on him. No one praised his efficiency. At lunch he ate alone. When he passed the conference rooms, he avoided looking in. He didn't need reminders of where he hadn't landed. At home, he adjusted again. Grocery lists changed. He stopped buying things he didn't need. He fixed a loose cabinet hinge instead of replacing it. He tracked every hour. The math was tight but workable if nothing went wrong. Something usually did. One afternoon, the school called. His son had a fever. He left work without asking permission, emailed from the car, and picked him up. At home, he set the boy on the couch with a blanket and water. He checked his temperature, then checked the clock. You're missing work, the boy said. It's okay. Are you sure? The man looked at him. The boy's face was flushed, eyes glassy but alert. Yes, he said, and meant it. That night, while the boy slept on the couch, the man answered emails on his phone. He didn't mention the fire. He didn't mention the interview. He kept his messages clean and brief. Later, after midnight, he stood in the hallway and looked at the suit hanging by the door. He reached out and brushed the sleeve once, then let his hand fall. The stain was still there. It always would be. At work, the woman from the fire kept her distance. When they crossed paths, they nodded. Sometimes they spoke about tasks, nothing else. He appreciated that. It allowed him to do the job without carrying the weight of the story into every room. One afternoon, she asked him to stay behind after a meeting. The others left. The room emptied. I want you to know, she said, standing by the table, that what you did mattered, not just to me. He waited. But this place, she continued, doesn't always reward the right things. He nodded. I know. She studied him, then said, most people would have asked for more. He considered that. I didn't do it for this. I know. The conversation ended there. They both returned to their work. At home, his son's fever broke. They sat at the table eating soup. The boy blew on his spoon, then looked up. You didn't tell me everything about the fire, he said. The man stirred his bowl. What do you think I didn't tell you? The boy thought. That you were scared. The man stopped stirring. He looked at his son. then nodded once. Yeah, he said. I was. The boy accepted that without comment. He finished his soup and pushed the bowl away. Later, after the boy went to bed, the man sat alone and thought about the version of himself he'd been before the fire, the one who believed doing the right thing and doing the smart thing were usually the same. He understood now that they weren't, and that understanding didn't feel heavy. It felt settled. The shift became visible when the schedule changed again. An email arrived late in the afternoon, marked urgent, but written in the same neutral language as the others. A restructuring, a reassessment of needs. His role would be absorbed into another department at the end of the month. No hard feelings. No accusations. Just a quiet narrowing of space. He read the message once, then again, the words didn't move. At home, he didn't say anything right away. He made dinner. He helped with homework. He listened to his son explain a drawing in careful detail. The boy noticed the delay, but didn't press. After dishes, the man sat at the table and folded the email printout in half. They might not keep me, he said. The boy looked at him. Like the other job? Not exactly. But you're still going tomorrow? Yes. The boy nodded, then asked, Did you do something wrong? The man answered without hesitation. No. That seemed to matter. The boy returned to his drawing. The following week, the woman asked him into her office. The door closed softly behind them. There were no raised voices, no tension that needed managing. They're cutting the contract, she said. Finance signed off this morning. He nodded. He had already prepared for this. Not emotionally, practically. I pushed back, she added. As much as I could. I know. She hesitated, then said, They see you as a risk. He waited. Because you act, she continued, without asking first. He considered that. Sometimes. She looked at him carefully. In this place, that matters. I understand. There was a silence, thick but controlled. Finally, she spoke again. I can write a recommendation, she said. A strong one. He nodded. Thank you. As he stood to leave, she said his name. He turned. If the fire hadn't happened, she said, you would have gotten the first job. He didn't respond right away. Then I know. Outside, the hallway was empty. He walked past the conference room where he'd first seen her in a different role, holding his future in a folder. The door was open now. Someone else sat at the table laughing quietly with a colleague. He didn't stop. On his last day, he cleared the desk slowly. He left the pen holder, the stapler. He took only what he'd brought. Before leaving, he straightened the chair and wiped the surface with his sleeve. At home, his son noticed the early arrival. You're back, the boy said. Yes. Forever. The man smiled once. No. They sat together on the couch, not talking. Later, the man opened his laptop and updated his resume. He added the role he'd just lost. He didn't explain the ending. Before bed, the boy stood in the doorway. You still saved her, he said. The man looked up. Yes? That doesn't go away. The man nodded. Outside, the city moved on without him. Inside, he turned off the light and let the dark settle where it needed to. The next morning did not rush him. There was no alarm demanding precision. No schedule taped to a wall. Light came in through the window and stayed there, steady and patient. He lay in bed longer than usual, listening to the building wake up around him. Pipes clicked. A door shut somewhere down the hall. Someone's radio turned on, then off. In the kitchen, he made breakfast the same way he always had. Eggs in the same pan. Toast browned carefully. When his son came in, he didn't say anything at first. He climbed into his chair and waited. You don't have work today, the boy said. No. Do you have work tomorrow? I don't know yet. The boy nodded. He took a bite and chewed slowly. Okay. They walked to school together instead of driving. The air was cooler than it had been all week. The street felt wider without the pressure of time. When they reached the corner, the boy stopped. Are you still going to look for jobs? He asked. Yes, even if they don't like what you do. The man considered that. He watched a bus pull away, exhaust hanging in the air for a moment before fading. "Yes," he said. The boy accepted that and turned toward the school. Halfway to the door, he looked back. "You didn't leave her," he said. The man waited. No. Other people would have. The man didn't argue. Maybe. The boy shrugged and went inside. The day unfolded without structure. The man made calls, sent emails, walked to the cleaners, and finally dropped off the suit. He didn't ask if the stain would come out. He didn't need it to. In the afternoon, he walked past the building downtown. He hadn't planned to. His feet took him there, on their own. The entrance was clear. No guards, no smoke. People passed in and out, carrying coffee, folders, conversations. He stood across the street and watched for a moment. The building did not acknowledge him. He didn't expect it to. His phone buzzed, a reply to one of his emails. Not an offer, just interest. A request to talk. He answered it later, after he picked his son up, after they walked home together. After dinner was made and eaten, he answered it carefully, the way he did most things now. That night, after his son fell asleep, he folded laundry in the living room. The suit was gone from the chair. The space it left felt clean, not empty. He turned off the light and stood there, hands at his sides. Nothing about his life looked impressive. Nothing was secure. But when he closed his eyes, the sound he remembered wasn't the alarm. It was the moment after, when the door opened and someone stepped back into the air. The world had moved on. He had not, and that, quietly, had changed everything.